Hey guys, this is Chesser. I had received quite a number of positive reviews over a recent Confessor video that I had made showing some first-person PvP footage, and I had remembered that when I had made my Slicer videos, a lot of people were questioning me about, how I'm positioning my ship, how I'm actually flying the way I fly, and I think it was kind of clumsy in the original videos for me just to try and write in paragraph form. Quickly explaining what's going on screen. So I've got some new clips together, and hopefully with this commentary I'll be able to help some people out who are trying to learn how to fly this way or just want to maybe know more about this aspect of flying for frigates. And hopefully I can just cover a few situations that you might encounter and you might be able to help apply to your own PvP or your own flying. Anyway, I hope you enjoy, and we'll just get right into it. Now at a ping spot well off the crow and his gang. I'm just going to kind of fly lazily upwards. My idea here is to convince the crow to come down to attack me. That way I can kill him quickly before his gang can arrive. I want to make myself look like a really juicy target. I want to try and stay more than 150k away, so that way his gang can warp to the crow and maybe the crow will be more aggressive. Slicer versus crow, it's really heavily tilted in my favor just because I do great damage. I do a ton of damage to him, especially in a great damage type. So here I am just kind of flying upwards, and you'll notice that, it seems to be working fairly well. This crow is actually pretty fast, so I know he's got speed mods and a low, but he's coming in at a really aggressive angle here. Pretty obvious click approach because he falls well below my altitude line and clearly isn't using any type of deflection piloting. And as you can see here now, he starts to slow down just a little bit as he turns around pretty rapidly to catch me, and it starts crawling back for altitude. So at this point, I'm just kind of lazily like swerving myself back and forth in an S shape. I'm just doing this to bleed a little bit of speed, but to not turn around and face him because the Ishtars and everything else that's landing behind me, they might get a clean shot at me and I could die. I'm purposely not repping here just because I want to look like a juicy target, keep the crow interested. As you can see, he just kept approaching me with basically no transversal and took, 180 DPS of EM to the face. Alright, this next clip that I'm going to show you is slowed down initially, and it's just a really, really good example of some deflection piloting and, piloting very, very aggressively in order to get the kill. So this clip right here, a crow is basically flying right at me. However, he is below me and is pulling down while I'm, above him. So at first I don't know if he's being aggressive or not towards me, so I'm kind of piloting away from him towards this arc, but as you can see here, I'm slowly starting to turn back towards his direction already. I'm kind of unsure of what his intentions are. However, pretty quickly, right about here, when I notice he's not turning back on me or even locking me up, that he's just trying to escape. So had I have just clicked approach, my ship would have stopped, and the deceleration and receleration of me trying to catch up to him would not have allowed me to catch this crow, who at this point is aligning away, heating his MWD. You'll notice now that I'm using deflection piloting, or I'm telling my slicer to go in space of where the crow is going to be, not where the crow is. What little you can see of my slicer, I'm completely keeled over on the side, like maximum turn, maximum agility, and I'm actually going close to full speed here and gaining on a crow that's heating an MWD away in a straight line here just for these brief seconds, which is all I really need to secure the kill. Transversal was low, and I was able to just hit some really, really nice shots here, which allowed me to secure the kill thanks to this super aggressive piloting. All of that happened pretty quickly. So just to give you an idea of how fast that kind of is, in-game, and why I think friggin' PvP is so amazing, I'm just going to play that clip again with no narration just so you can see, how fast that happens in-game. This isn't sped up at all, this is just real play, so I hope you enjoy. For this next clip here, I'm actually just fighting another slicer. It's not ideally the best clip because he doesn't really shoot back at me that much, but this is kind of showing an ideal, how to fight another slicer if you're in a slicer. The entire idea is just transversal control and keeping range. In this case, I'm kind of hovering right outside of multi-frequency range, assuming that he might try to switch to multi and maybe miss a few shots. But in this case, I'm just trying to fly basically right next to him. I'm not trying to do anything fancy. I'm trying to keep my transversal as low as possible, and it just lets me hit wrecking shots and just completely get a quick kill. So, introducing the beam slicer, I really kind of started flying it in response to Garmers, which the entire ship has created a lot of ire amongst the frig community, and for good reason. But the beam slicer, in my opinion, completely outclasses the Garmer in basically every single way. With Aurora, you're looking at 150 DPS, optimal of 70. Uh, Gamma Imperial Navy, which is what I'm normally packing, is 25 plus 3, heated DPS of 234. What's nice is you can switch to multi, which is 255 heated DPS, and that is optimal to 20. So if you're a little bit closer against a higher tanked target, you can just switch to multi if you need that little bit more DPS to break a tank or just to kill them quickly and to bring them down. And then lastly, you have Gleam, which is heating close to 260 DPS, optimal of 10, and of course you get that really really nice tracking increase. The beam slicer has lots of advantages, but it has some disadvantages as well. Its cap is, a really difficult struggle, at least for me, to be able to fly. You can cap yourself out extremely quickly, so you need to be really cognizant of that. And the other issue with the beam slicer is that its weakness to TDs and flying poorly or not flying to help reduce your transversal can really kind of make you drop off quickly in DPS compared to a pulse slicer. Pulse slicer can function a little better under a TD, and of course you don't need to fly as carefully to help reduce some of your transversal. Here are some fights that are just going to kind of showcase some of the strengths and weaknesses of the beam slicer. Hope you can enjoy. So this clip here is a Garmer and Sentinel versus my beam slicer. The Sentinel obviously can completely break me with TDs, so I need to be really cognizant of that. However, now he's kind of off the grid and not a factor, so I'm going to try and fight the Garmer as best as I can. At no point when I'm fighting a Garmer am I really concerned about them, because if they can apply damage to me, I can apply damage to them, and my damage is just so much more. So I'm really trying to take the fight to him here. I'm flying really aggressively. At this point, I don't even mind if he would scram me, because if he would, I can just switch to multi and just probably 3-shot him before the Sentinel even has a chance to warp down. We kind of merge right here, and he just blows right by me. He's not packing a scram, and the Sentinel warps down. So at this point, I need to be really cognizant of that. I start heating my MWD away, and I just keep burning in the vector that I was already flying in, and the goal here is to just burn out of the Sentinel TD range. Now, I'm basically applying 0 DPS to him, but the second those TDs drop, that Garmer has 0 transversal, he's approaching me, he's going to basically just get 3-shot. And he doesn't even have a chance to align out before he's just dead. I was purposely keeping my armor low, just to keep him keen, wanting him to keep following me, keep giving chase like that. And in situations like that where you pick up a kill, where I think the beam slicer really has some cool advantages over the pulse. On the other hand, though, my cap is really hurting, so there are trade-offs to some of the plays that you can make. So this next part of the video might get a little bit too in-depth, maybe a little bit too nerdy. Could totally possibly be that I'm reading too much into it. But I'm just going to kind of discuss slicer flying, and then transversal. Transversal is this mystical thing in Eve where people like to just sum it down into don't click approach, quote unquote corkscrew in to reduce your transversal, and then don't fly directly away. And in a sense, yeah, that's transversal, but it's a very very basic elementary view of it. In regards to flying the slicer, I'm going to use just some quick terms here that I use in real life to maybe describe things better and to make it easier for me to talk over clips of me flying. The first is just going to be BFM, which is basic fighter maneuvering. So in real life, that just basically means like a split S or an Immelman, or flying your ship aggressively in real life, to shoot down a bad guy or whatever. In the context of Eve, obviously, it's not a real physics comparison, but there are, some parallels that can be made between flying your ship appropriately in Eve with BFM and using that to reduce your transversal. In a pulse slicer, to begin with, this transversal isn't really a huge deal. Scorch has really nice tracking, especially if you're keeping the target out, at your optimal, which is close to 27 kilometers. So really there is no tracking issue at that point. But a little bit closer at 20k, especially with interceptors, high skilled interceptors, and of course if the person you're fighting against is using links, certainly you can start running into some issues there. But for beam slicers, this is really important. Reducing transversal, reducing BFM problems. So like a BFM problem would be 2 ships flying directly at each other, kind of like in that Crow video I showed you earlier, where the merge happens, which is where 2 ships, if you think of just flying right at each other, right when they cross that midpoint, right when they fly past each other, that is the merge. That situation right there, how do you deal with that if they're not directly flying at you, if you're at different altitudes, and then of course that super high transversal moment when you're closing distance on each other, you pass each other and then you're flying away? that entire space of time you're going to be missing shots. So flying the slicer and like the beam slicer, of course, the entire idea is to reduce that from happening, reducing the aggressive cornering, reducing aggressive acceleration, deceleration. If you're gaining altitude or losing altitude, that's the entire idea of the slicer is to just reduce BFM the entire time you're flying against a target. A great example is like a pulse slicer versus a beam slicer. That fight in general, the pulse slicer is fighting the entire time to make BFM problems for the beam slicer. He's going to come in at really aggressive angles at really high speeds. He's going to try and like push for a merge as fast as he can. And that's going to allow him to switch into multi-frequency, and you're going to hopefully switch to gleam. But at that point, he's totally has an advantageous position because he's doing similar DPS to you with a better optimal and way better tracking. So, from the beam slicer's point of view, he's trying to reduce BFM problems as much as possible. If a slicer likes to just sit out at 26 and 24K against a beam slicer, the beam slicer is going to win that fight easily. And this upcoming fight that I want to show you is just kind of an example of that. Me trying to reduce BFM problems, reducing transversal to my targets as much as possible, while still flying in an effective manner. That's kind of where the entire idea of feathering comes in, because it allows you to fly evasively, it allows you to fly dynamically against a fleet, while still, if a ship clicks approach on you and they start falling into your arc, it reduces transversal immensely and allows you basically just to hit wrecking shots the entire time on them. So enough of me talking, we'll just jump right into the clip. So here at the beginning of this fight, the enemy fleet has a lot of long-range snipers. You need to be cognizant of that. You need to fly the entire time trying to keep transversal against them. And I want to keep these aggressive frags coming out at me at like 135, 140, 120, so that way the enemy fleet can't warp to me in this situation, because there's a few frags here that I might want to fight. But let's get right into the fight here. So I switched to Gamma right away, and the fight starts out pretty nicely. He's flying above me, slowly, and I am just slowly giving chase. I'm not trying to be really aggressive here, so you'll notice my clicking is just reducing itself. I completely make a mistake here and let him basically crash into me, creating a high BFM problem. You'll notice here I take a ton of damage while basically doing nothing to him. But on his flyout, he's not curving away, so I'm basically just hitting wrecking shot after wrecking shot after wrecking shot here, and now he's dead because he made a giant mistake here, and I was just able to, after the merge, to keep everything together and get the kill. The second situation here is the Ares now engaging me, and me having to rep up because I'm getting hit by a few of the snipers. I'm just kind of going in a nice arc here, and this is a player pretty much just using a click approach on me, although now he's starting to slowly fly away. But for that short time there, I was basically just hitting wrecking shots on him, and I would have killed him, but as you can see, the cap issues that I was talking about earlier with the beam slicer really come into play, and I wasn't really able to stay on the field, just A, from poor piloting, and B, because I was kind of over-repping a little bit too much there. He is not moving or just slowly A-Bing, so his sentinels, his signature is almost 0, and I'm orbiting quickly, fairly close to him with my Gamma, and kind of creating a good situation there. I was reducing my BFM because I was just orbiting basically below him very nicely. Now this slicer engagement goes perfectly for me. We both start out going in a straight line here. I am just basically piloting away from him, really being gentle on my arc back towards him. We kind of start merging in here, but I pull away right here at the end, and this is basically just a perfect situation for me. Fighting a slicer, right at my optimal. He's not creating any BFM problems for me. He's not trying to crash into me, create these high-speed approaches, and I was able to just defensively fly with basically no transversal, both of us flying away and perpendicular to each other, parallel to each other, and it was an easy kill. This Thrasher here, the BFM problems that a slicer has to worry about when fighting destroyers are very small, just because they have a huge signature radius. The Gleam Slicer is the beam slicer is really nice in this situation here, just because of the huge DPS that you can do to thrashers and destroyers in general. Again, the cap issue is already coming into play here. I'm turning off my MWD just to coast out at 17, 18 here. I noticed that the thrasher is hardly moving at all, and he doesn't have a prop mod turned on, so as far as I'm concerned, I can just coast out here at 18 and just pick up a free kill. But the real issue of the slicer is kind of coming into play, as you've noticed now in 2 fights, where your cap using MWD rep point and guns really drains out fast, even though you do a surprising amount of DPS. So in this second clip, I basically spawn in a bubble, Claw and a Saber were ganking a poor hauler, and I start the fight. I'm originally kind of expecting the Claw to kind of isolate itself versus the slower Thrasher, the slower Saber, and it doesn't actually end up happening. The Saber actually just decides to come at me alone. This is just a clip of just showing, in best case scenario, how you can reduce BFM for yourself. In this case, I'm keeping him nicely at range, not making really any sudden movements at all, keeping my transversal nice and low. Again, this is a lot easier against a big SIG'd target like a destroyer, and certainly against a ship that's a lot less agile than you and a lot slower than you. I'm just using this clip to just kind of show, whether you're fighting a frig or whatever else, to watch for when a player clicks in a line out and just starts flying away from you. This happens pretty shortly here with this Saber, where he's literally just clicking in a line out. Right now he's just aligned to the sun and is just flying away. And as you can see, I just kind of fly up to the side of him here, and I'm just flying ahead of him, slowly arcing around him, just because he has literally just clicked away in a straight line and has started his NWD. Always try and look for that when you're fighting someone and use it to your advantage. So this fight, a lot like the last, I jump in, Saber bubbles up, it's Slicer versus Saber. And again, this is just a good example of just showing, in an ideal situation against an easy target, how you want to pilot to reduce your BFM at all times. So I'm not trying to make any quick moves. I'm not trying to, heat my MWD, do anything super crazy here. The Saber is very slow and not very agile compared to me. So I just try and keep basically no fast turns, no crazy angles of attack, and I'm not trying to orbit him too quickly, just trying to keep him at range, keep him at the end of the pole. Transversal is low, and it's nice here in this situation. You have an armor repping, Saber, Minotaur Tech 2 resists, and thanks to the amount of DPS that you can do with the beam slicer, you can run his AAR out pretty quickly here. And again, this player is just basically click, approach, aligning into the sun, and now I just fly up parallel next to him, and my transversal almost here is almost 0, so I'm just hitting for basically maximum damage. That's exactly where you want to be. So like last time, you always want to watch for when the player goes into panic mode or gives up mode. They click in a line of Celestial, and they're just flying away in a straight line. Always try to, again, exploit that. So again, I've got another good fight. This one's against frigates finally, instead of just big slow Sabers. This is a Slicer and some interceptors versus me. So starting the fight out, you want to try and pull some distance, separate them a little bit. Try and see if you can get the faster interceptors to come on you first, instead of trying to duel the Slicer. Slicer can project damage like you can and can do damage, so ideally either avoid it or kill it quickly first. I generally tend to avoid them. Here I'm engaging the Crow, and again, I'm not aggressively going at him. I'm trying to keep my transversal as low as possible, and in a lot of cases, flying away in a straight line is a great way to do that. However, in many frigate fights, the frigates can be faster than you, and they can catch you quickly. Not to mention, if bigger ships are shooting at you, your transversal to them is 0, so flying away in a straight line, while it seems like a great idea, it may not always be in your situations. However, in this here, where there are no big ships on field, me flying straight away and this Slicer deciding to just click approach me, transversal is 0, he's Imperial Navy Gamma to the face, and just dies immediately. And again, in this situation here, I get to basically fly away in a straight line. I'm not engaging anything super aggressive at the moment. This Atron basically is making the exact same mistake that the Slicer is, and is flying right at me. He actually wisens up though and pulls away. I try and turn around again, just to make myself look available, or to be closed upon by some of the other ships that are left in the gang now that the Atron's bugged out. The Crow's really the only thing left. And here we come in, and he starts pulling away from me immediately, so he's using keep it range. And here I'm using deflection piloting aggressively against him, and I'm pointing and I'm clicking where he's going to be, not where he is. And that also allows me to really reduce my BFM problems, really reduce my transversal, and basically just fly in a straight line to where he's slowly arcing back from. So I'm just hitting him with wrecking shots. A few more ships warp in here, but I need to be really cognizant and careful of the heretic. Light missile ships, especially ones that can project very far, can be the death of a Slicer. So you always need to be very careful if you see either a heretic or a flycatcher. Just a quick explanation before the next clip. There are 2 Slicers, and then just 2 Garmers, and we're actually just engaging each other in a 2v2, I just want to quickly let you know, just because fraps started a little bit late, and this is, again, a really, really great example of deflection piloting, and just using it to, just bag a kill on an opponent who might be a little bit faster than you or is trying to, bug out. So we have 2 slicers, 2 garmers. We're trying to focus our damage just on one that I have locked up. The slicers are kind of focusing while the garmer is completely split here and one of them goes away. Now this enemy garmer that we have completely isolated, I'm never clicking on him, never clicking approach. I'm looking at where he's going in my tactical overlay, and I'm making deflection piloting choices to always cut off his angle of attack, to always fly smarter. This allows me to actually gain ground against a garmer who is faster than me and is trying to heat away. Allows me just to get these really, really nice wrecking shots on the end, secure the kill, and get out safely. So here's an example of how I would start to engage a large frigate gang. Here there's just a ton of T1 frigates just pouring through this gate. Just glancing at my overview, I just need to make sure that there aren't a ton of interceptors, because as a solo slicer, if there's like 2 or 3 of them, you're going to build up a lot of heat fighting them, and it can spell your doom. In this case though, there's just a single malediction, which isn't that big of a problem. I already start curving down, and I'm actually still flying towards the gate, but I'm gaining ground because I'm flying underneath it, so I'm just decreasing my altitude. The malediction is starting to isolate itself a little bit against against the other frig, so that's good. I obviously want to primary him. His long scram means death to me if he can get me with it, so he needs to be kind of at the forefront of my concentration. I'm really starting to pull a ton of range here, and the malediction completely peels off, so I literally turn around and stop to keep the fight going, and this is going to turn out to just look almost perfect. I'm actually going to freeze frame here just so that way you can see what we're going to be looking at, but this right here is literally the ideal. A ton of T1 frigates coming around in this nice arc. This is like the start of basically what I like to jokingly call frig genocide, and I just want to capture this moment, because in a second it's going to be all ruined by a horrible ship class called Recons. So again, we have this gorgeous feather set up, and you'll notice just a little blip appear below me, and that's actually a rapier, but I'm so caught up with concentrating on all the ships that are now spiraling beautifully behind me, getting ready to be kited out, that it was a rapier. And the webs are on, and the ships that I was just starting to kite are now starting to pile on top of me. I originally thought that it was the Rifter, but obviously it was the rapier double webbing me, and I died basically in short order. And I just wanted to kind of end it with that, just because, as beautiful as things can look, all of a sudden some bastard uncloaks in a ship and you're dead. Anyway, I hope that this wasn't too nerdy or too crazy. I hope you guys maybe learned something that you can apply to your own flying. I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, take care, fly safe.